Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a priest! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host John, also known as 4020. Joining me to break down another week of Parramatta and NRL happenings are my good mates 60s and Quint. Fellas, I'll throw to you now, but it's on a sombre note, 60s. Hope you're holding up well, mate. But how you doing?
Well, I can't lie about, what the last week has been like. It's probably been the worst week of my life. But what I wanted to do, just to start off with, is to thank everyone who's responded to the post about Dad. It was a matter of, look, I found it very comforting to have the wonderful responses that were there, and it helped me when I was able to get up, because I wasn't really able to put anything up there. Dad passed on Thursday, and I obviously it was a bit hard for me to put some words together, and I didn't want to jump into doing social media platform posting or anything like that. And then I think from memory, I was able to put this together to put out on Sunday, and we had a lot of people read it, and many people reply with some kind words and words of comfort. And that was lovely. And I really want to thank everyone who did so, and all the people who also reached out to me with direct messages, texting, phoning. It's, it's wonderful to have so many people out there who extend offers of help or just support, and or just simply asking, are you okay? It really does make you feel feel good about the community and about your friends. And, so again, thank you to everyone who did that. And for a lot of people have asked me when we were having Dad's service. So in case there's anyone there that I haven't managed to reply by text or other forms of messaging or phone calls, Dad's service will be at Castlebrook at midday on Monday. So hopefully, because we're not doing any obituary notice in the newspapers or anything like that. So hopefully, just by us letting people know, a bit of word of mouth, and also here on TCT that I have managed to let everyone know when the service is. So yeah, and thank you to fellas for reaching out to me as well during this time. It's Dad lived a long life, but as both of you know, with how unwell he'd been over the last decade, that a lot of my routines were based around Dad's needs. And things have been pretty busy, obviously, since Dad passed, with making a lot of arrangements and what have you. And it's sort of like a little bit of a new chapter of the life going into with. I still got Mum to take care of, but and you know what? Just now that we're ready to start talking about the football, I'm going to say, here's what I took full advantage of tonight. Yoko said to me, Craig, you need to get onto the podcast and talk about some football. Now, if Yoko's telling me I have to talk about football, hey, I've got to grab that with both hands. So I'm here, and thank you also, fellas, for making a few changes to our podcast this week and our day.
We love you, mate. We love you, mate, and the community out there loves you. It's nothing.
Thanks, fellas.
And Quint, how you doing, mate? I know our week's been a little bit better than Craig's, obviously, but it's been a rough one in terms of football stuff as well.
Yeah, look, I'll be honest. I've just been largely thinking about our friend Craig, and it's very common when people experience things like that to internalize your own experiences with things like that. However, because of and hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn when I reference this for you as well, John. We've had our own experiences in both losing a parent and we know exactly what our friend's going through. So football has been happening, but it's been in the backseat because we love our mate and we care about our mate. And equally so, to echo his comments, I was so glad to see everything that was all the comments on the post Craig shared, and likewise throughout the Twitter feed. It's really heartening to know that the Eels and rugby league communities out there supporting him, and as are we all during this time. So, to answer your question, my heart and thoughts have been largely in that space, if I'm brutally honest.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk some football. We'll be obviously responsible about it, but before we do, quick shout out to the sponsors of the show: Big Swing Golf, Northmead, and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn and Rowan and Parramatta, helping us get the show out to each and every one of you for each episode. All right, boys, let's talk some football.
News team, assemble!
Yeah, tough week for the Parramatta Eels, fellas, going down in two fronts, in the Jersey Flegg and the NRLW. The Flegg, unfortunately, we said it in our sort of run through to the finals, that the only thing that could stop them, really, despite there being some talented opposition, was themselves, and we saw that in full action out at Leichhardt Oval on Saturday, going down 31-18 to Sydney Roosters. Full credit to the Roosters, they played some good football. Their halfback in particular, who was, let me just check his name. He had the 24. Yeah, Cassius Teo. I thought he was very good in this game. Very difficult to bring down. Big unit for a halfback. But the Roosters were able to take full advantage of the Eels, really struggling to get through their sets in the second half. Eels went in at half-time with a very healthy lead. I think it was along the tunes of 16...
18-10.
18-10, there you go. Yeah, 18-10. So not a game-winning lead by any means, but a very healthy lead. Unfortunately, in the second half, it felt like they could not get past halfway without making an error. And on the flip side, whenever the Roosters were in their half, they were getting spotted a penalty. Some of that I thought was some terrible officiating. Not making excuses for the Eels. I thought there was some very bad officiating at times in this game. But in general, I thought the Eels were just very, very poor. And it sucks to see them bow in this sort of manner, knowing that they could have won the title from where they were at, being looking for a ticket to the grand final for winning that game. But maybe they come back bigger and better from the loss with a bit of hunger in 2024 to play more meaningful football, perhaps.
Yeah, this was a match that I was watching on the live stream. For obvious reasons, I wasn't out at Leichhardt Oval, but I was watching bits of the live stream. It was a little bit disjointed, so if I'm a little bit disjointed in my comments, that's the reason why. But I was so looking forward to what I was hoping was going to be a grand final appearance this week. I want to send out a really special thanks to Coach Craig Brennan, Mardo, the team manager, all the staff, the players. In the last couple of weeks, I've been made very welcome down there at Eels training and with the captain's run, and I'd been able to sit in on the video session and the team meeting, and I was due to do that last week as well. So I was looking forward to this being some great coverage that we would be able to provide on TCT, some insights into what was going to be a grand final week and trying to document the grand final week for them. But Craig has now finished his responsibilities with the Eels. He won't be coaching at the club next year. It's obviously we're disappointed to see that there isn't that he won't have a role continuing with the club. He's a fantastic bloke, a great coach. He's been someone that has provided us with some tremendous insights into the young players coming through and helped us in our coverage on TCT. It's hard to say enough good things about Craig. He's a tremendous mentor for young players, and whilst we're sure that Jordan Rankin is going to do a good job with the Jersey Flegg team next year, it's also impossible to ignore the role that Craig Brennan's played in so many of these young players, because we've been familiar with him from not just the Jersey Flegg, but also his coaching role in junior reps before that. And again, John and we've been privileged to be part of video analysis and team meetings and captain's runs, and the sort of access that we've been allowed as part of our coverage of junior reps has been nothing short of sensational. And it wouldn't be possible without coaches like Breno, and we also have to say the same. Like Steve O'Day has given us tremendous access as well. Chris Howard is also he won't be coaching at the Eels next year, and the same with Chris. The insights, the access, the just making us feel as if we're part of the group, part of what's happening through the year. And of course, obviously we provide the official match reports for the Parramatta Eels on the junior reps, but to be given that sort of access is great. Same with Ryan Walker with the Tasha Gale team, also wonderful access. Just and being able to pick up the phone and talk to these fellas about what's happening with the team to know about the players that we're commenting on is a huge advantage for us in what we do. And they've just been great people to deal with. Ryan won't be the coach of the Tasha Gale team next year. I believe he's moving into another role within the club. I believe it's a bit of a promotion for Ryan, so congratulations to him. Shah Henry will be taking over the coaching role for the Tasha Gale team. But again, and I'm rambling a bit, our thanks to all those coaches, and that special thanks to Craig Brennan, and wishing him well. And I'm just hoping that we see him around the traps, because he's a real Parramatta bloke. Mm-hmm. He's Parramatta to the core, blue and gold to the core, and just a quality human. And I'm sure we are going to see him around the traps, coming out and watching the team. So it would have been great if the team had been able to send him out on a high.
It would have been a hell of a double. Yeah, doing the ball flag double. And we knew they had the talent. It was never about the talent. It was just about having that one, not even game, that one half where you slip up and you just become your own worst enemy. And unfortunately, the Roosters, the minor premiers who only dropped a couple of games all season, well, they're more than capable enough of being able to, take full advantage of the sort of opportunities offered by the Eels in the second half. And
they really just fell apart and went completely away from the game plan.
Yep. Yeah,
it was real unfortunate, and you can see what can happen. You could have some of the most talented players in the team, but if they don't work together in a particular match, if they fall away from the game plan, if things just don't work well, I guess we saw what the result can be. But that doesn't take away from what was a tremendous back half of the season.
Incredible run.
I think they won something like 9 out of the last 10 or 10 out of the last 11 games in that run. And, there was, and I contend we never saw their best football. I know what their best game was, but I don't believe we saw their best football. I don't believe that they played to their true potential, because there was always that error or too many that was in there. And I guess what we're talking about is an age team, isn't it? Like, they're still learning their craft, and they're learning how to be professional footballers. And I think the Roosters team were a little bit older, and they steadied the ship in a match where they needed to, got the job done. So congratulations to them.
Yep. And, you speak about it being a young team, Craig. I'm not sure how long the Jersey Flegg can contain some of these players. There's a whole stream of them that I hope will be part of the NRL preseason, at least up until Christmas. But then after that, who knows where their future lies in 2024 and beyond? Is it, Flegg Cup? Maybe, if crazy long shot happens, maybe there could be not a full-time job in the NRL, but maybe a little cameo or spotlight at some point later in the season if injuries or suspension open the door. So very much a positive wait and see there. But
can I just say as well that there are probably going to be players. Well, no, not probably. There will be players deserving of a pre-season that won't get it, and the reason for that is that there are just limits to the numbers, and then the Eels have to select, the coaches have to select, perhaps the people responsible for recruitment and retention might have some say, because there is a dollar element involved as well, because there's contracts that have pre-seasons written into them and those sorts of things. It's a complex process getting a pre-season. It might be a bit more than what people realise, because the players that get a pre-season, they get money based on the amount of time that they are putting into the club during a pre-season. If they're training full time during the week with that, players have it written into their contracts going forward that in a certain year they might be entitled to a certain number of weeks of a pre-season or a full pre-season, or maybe they go onto the full-time training contract. They might have a development deal. There's a whole range of different contracts that can involve a pre-season. And as I said, there will be players that will miss out and would be deserving of getting it. And you might hear of some rumblings or what have you, and they're probably well-founded as far as the individual player is concerned. And it's just, I guess, calls have to be made, and there will be people who agree and disagree with the calls that are made.
Like you said, it's more complex than it seems on the surface. You can't just say, you're a good young player, let's throw you into the preseason. Like you said, there is a monetary sort of cap element assigned to it. There are some players which I think are probably relative no-brainers. You're talking about young Bud Zafa, Blaze Tuilagi, Richard Penasini. I think Ethan Sanders was probably a shoe-in prior to signing of Canberra. I don't know if that's changed the scenery there. One player though, I mean, you look at that team, and in terms of players that are worthy of it, you got Arpa Tweedle, obviously Blaze Tuilagi, Richard Penasini. You got Lynn, Sanders, Parker, Buds, Jonte, Brazel. I mean, Tupou and Lenars equally so. If they're, I don't know what their contract status of the club is, but if they're here, they could definitely do it. Geimer, Tuivasa, Will Ladu. Like, most of the team could definitely be in the contention for it. But one player, I think, I don't know if he's going to be part of that puzzle, but the one player I think I want to see would be Ethan Martin. He really lit up that you talk about those 9 or 10 games they won 60s, and he was a huge factor coming to the club late in the piece, and he looked like the sort of player where things were constantly happening when he was on or near the ball.
Yeah, and I mean, Clint, how much benefit is a pre-season going to be to someone of relative inexperience like Ethan Martin?
The best way of describing it is that it'll slingshot his development. the other part of this equation that, and you gentlemen have summarized it very beautifully, that the predicament that exists there with it is, the other factor is that there's positions that we want to develop because it's about succession planning and trying to potentially strengthen weaknesses or perceived weaknesses. Or maybe that's an unkind word. Maybe the opportunities that exist within the senior NRL squad, but a full preseason and having full-time training in the environment, because in a team environment, you almost want to be one of those development players, and I'm going to use quote unquote, and I don't mean this comment with any disrespect, but around the senior guys, and if you're one of the development players who's been invited to a preseason, you're going to be physically and probably skill wise one of the weaker players there. And the reason I say that it slingshots your development is because you are who you associate with, and being in an environment and constantly around that level and that caliber of player is going to elevate them themselves, which is ultimately what you're trying to achieve in offering the preseasons to the young boys. So, to answer your question directly, it would be monumental for someone like him, because the raw talent is absolutely there, and he's only, is it 6-9 months that he's been with us now?
Wouldn't even be 6 months, Clint.
So, you think what 2 months of NRL preseason would do for him, 2 and a bit months. Oh wow! Considering what he achieved in the back end of this year in that grade, being around the senior players, having 2 months of preseason, it may very well elevate someone like Ethan Martin straight into New South Wales Cup in the early parts of next season.
He is flag eligible next year, isn't he, Craig?
No, I don't think so.
No, he is Cup.
Okay.
So then, that becomes the
Well,
priority.
there you go. That's a fait accompli, then, isn't it?
Yeah, I've got it. I've got it in my head that he turns 21 this year, because he was older than the other boys. Look, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's 20 this year, but he was definitely older than he was one of the older players in the group. And as you know, John, he's spent a few years traveling around the world with rugby union.
And
so,
I mean, obviously that team is very talented across all phases, all facets, all positional groups, but it's the sort of that trio of outside backs in Martin, Tuilagi and Penasini that probably have the best opportunity to make a move in a pre-season. So be keen to see what sort of opportunities they get and if they can take advantage of it. And
would you say, looking at the back end of the season, and we were seeing Blaze Tuilagi having to play, and the same happened in SG Ball, playing out in the centres, and he just seems like this year, I thought he took his game to a whole new level. He was doing things out there that just was stamped of class, class all over his form. It was, so I think he could be one of these players that we see in the back end of next season, maybe getting an appearance in the top grade. And we don't like to, put too many expectations on a player, but
it's the signs are there.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, I guess we wait with bated breath for who we get to see in the pre-season, for someone like Ethan Martin, well, you can imagine what a pre-season in the gym and that intensive training and Clint, you spoke before about you are who you associate with, and we can see that sometimes when players go up through the grades and they get better as they go up through the grades. But conversely, you want those players when they get a pre-season really to be ready for it. Over the years, I've seen players who haven't been ready, and they've literally wasted. For some of them, they got one shot at a pre-season. Turned up not being ready, barely lasted. Like, week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks into it, gone. Like you haven't turned up ready for this, mate. I'm sorry, you have to go back and train with the Jersey Flegg, or you have to go back and train with blokes on second tier deals. We'll see you in the season proper, sort of scenario. And it has happened over the years, and it again, it's not so much a matter of talent when that happens. It's that early part of the pre-season. It's, are you up for the physical demands of the pre-season? So I just hope, and I'm sure it's going to be the case, because I think a lot of the boys that get a pre-season, there's going to be ones there that did the Jet squad work during the year. And if they did the Jet squad work, that was a real, like a pre-season to the pre-season. So, I thank all those young blokes for a great season and wish them well heading into the pre-season.
Yes, sir. Definitely one to keep an eye on, and I'm sure your pre-season training reports will feature them prominently. But if it was a bad weekend for our boys in the Flegg, it was a horror weekend for our girls in the NRLW. They got pasted 56-6 by the Cronulla Sharks in a match featuring plenty of Eels and ex-Eels on both sides of the field. Unfortunately for our girls, it's the first ever 50-plus score conceded in the history of the competition. They were a risk of doing it earlier in the season, I think, against Newcastle and maybe one other game, but they managed to hold on, and this one it wasn't the case. Cronulla running riot tries to Preston, Dimmick, Johnston, Staples, Ravix, Biddle, Saunders, and then doubles to Johnston, Biddle, and Ravix from there. The Eels managed to avoid the shutout with a late try to Monique Donovan, with Rachel Pearson converting from out wide, but that was really the only positive to come out of this game. The girls just completely outclassed in a game where it looked like they were just running on fumes. They've had a tough few weeks against some of the heavyweights of the competition in the Sydney Roosters and the Gold Coast Titans, and they got to this game with not much on the line, given that the wooden spoon was all but theirs, given how results have played out throughout the course of the last couple of weeks. They would have needed a big win over the Sharks in order to qualify for the second last spot, and it just didn't come their way.
Defensively, I think the scoreline speaks for that. The line speed just really wasn't there when they were defending in the red zone. They just didn't and they were on the try line. They just didn't get off the line, did they? I mean,
way too passive.
When you're passive on your try line, and you've got an opposing forward just rampaging hard at you, there's not much you can do to hold them up. They were literally charging into the Eels defenders, bouncing off them and just dropping to the ground to score.
Yep.
And it was as simple as that. It's you had the sense that they were glad when the season was over. It was, as you said, they had a lot of injury challenges early in the season, and the year had got away for them before they even started. And unfortunately, they probably saved their worst performance for their last.
Yeah, they were on fumes. Like I said, a tough fortnight against two contenders in the Roosters and the Titans, where they'd been given the business in both games, to be pretty brutally honest. And it felt like they were sort of checked out and ready to, not for Mad Monday or anything like that, but just get the season over. And the Cronulla Sharks took full advantage of it, played some great football. I mean, the sort of confidence they were playing with was kind of crazy. Ellie Johnston, who I enjoyed her time at Parramatta, I thought she was a very talented forward, at one point was part of a big broken play movement where she got the ball midfield, was running down the right edge and threw a 20-metre cutout pass for the try assist to the winger. And we're talking about a big rumbling prop forward that was playing halfback in the context of that play. So they were playing with wild confidence in that game, and full credit to the Sharks. They played a great brand of footy. Our girls happy to shut the books on a pretty disappointing year between injury, suspension, and a very, very slow start. They sort of cost themselves any realistic chance of getting into the finals very early on. And yeah, now we have to build for next year. And speaking of, they also had their equivalent of the Ken Fournette medal for them, which I believe is it just billed as the NRLW? I think it's just the NRLW awards night right now. There is no affiliated name, given that the competition is so young into its infancy for the Parramatta Eels. But top winner of the top gong was Abby Church, who was our crowned player of the year. Cassie Toihiku was named the player's player, so no surprise for those two players, I think, fellas. I probably would have had it round the other way. I thought that Cassie was by far our best player, but the sort of the way the points went the other way. But Abby, to her credit, I thought was very good at fullback, so it's not like it was a disgraceful decision by any means.
Yeah, I couldn't argue with Abby, because in a team where the fullback can often be left isolated and look as if they're struggling, when there's so many line breaks that are made, I'd like to have a figure on how many try saves that she made.
Very good on the high ball. A lot of great ball and all tackles at the last line of defence. She had a few cases of the dropsies early in the season, but that really tidied up even before the midway point, and she was very efficient from there. And the other thing too is that she found ways to be productive without really being given a lot of opportunities to get downhill and attack the way some of the other fullbacks in the competition might enjoy. So yeah, Abby, very good. Cassie, we already spoken about her at length on the podcast, but she is a really like a breakout superstar there for the Parramatta Eels, and if they lose her, then they deserve to be running last pretty much every season moving forwards. So get the job done there. Other recipients, sorry, not acipients, that's not even a word, but other reward recipients include Mahalia Murphy, who took out the Coaches Award. I thought Mahalia was really strong when she made that move to the back row, so well done to Mahalia. And then we go down to the Community Award winner, who was Chantel Stowers. So well done to Chantel. And then I believe that also the Blue and Gold Army Award, so the Members Award went to Abby as well. She picked up the big double there, the fan vote and the overall gong. So well done to all reward recipients. And then
I have a question. I have a question for Clint here, and just with regard to the team, because based on form, based on results, the Eels were a long way off being competitive this season. And then when you break down some of the players that are on the Eels roster, and you end up, you go, oh yeah, she's got a lot to offer. She's got a lot to offer. Yeah, there's a bit of promise there, and I think there's a whole lot of players who are in the group of, could develop into a good player, or even ones that are returning to the game. That there is potential that they've got a winner there. However, it just didn't happen for them. And it's obvious that there's maybe one or two key signings in certain positions that they might to make, or maybe a tweak or two to things. Like one thought that I had was whether Abby Church could play within the halves and Cassie Toihiku at fullback, because I think she's got great pace off the mark. I think she's got a good passing game.
You're talking about the sort of the Luke Burt conundrum, but actually pulling the trigger on the move instead of keeping him out in backs.
Yeah. So it's look, I think there's something that needs to be done. But
if you've got a controlling,
talk me through it, Clint. How many players do you think they need to bring in to be competitive, or is it a matter of they have to tweak who they've got there? Do you think Dean Witter's coaching job is on the line, and that they are likely to make minimal changes to the roster and instead maybe change the coach? Talk me through what you think is going to happen.
I think all of these things are valid questions that should form part of a post-season review. And obviously, CEO Jim Sarantinos sent out a club email, I think it was a week and a half ago, almost 2 weeks ago now, informing the fan base that as such would take place at the conclusion of all senior football, and also including the Flegg within that. Yes, but I think they're all valid questions. Look, for me, the one I can directly answer is that as good as Abby was at fullback, I think we've got a real weapon in Cassie Toihiku that needs to be unleashed at fullback and having her hands on the ball as much as possible. But it's an equally good question that you pose with that supposition, Craig, is that Abby's also quite good, and we shouldn't be limiting her involvement. So potentially a move to 6 might be on the cards for her. I know initially in the season my thoughts were just to switch Abby and Cassie around and see what happened. But obviously Abby had a very, very good season and proved her value with ball in hand. And I think that's an idea potentially worth exploring, certainly within the NRLW preseason when they're doing their opposed sessions and their drills, just to see if there's a connection there. But it's also worth noting. I know that you gentlemen both rate Rosemary Beckett quite highly, and she's a more of a 7 than a 6. But do we another year under her belt and another preseason under her belt? Do we look to try and integrate her into the side and on a full-time basis next to Rachel Pearson? Those are other questions. Likewise, for someone like Lindsay Tui, who would have benefited from having some appearances at the back end of the NRLW season there. Correct me if I'm wrong, gents. I think she's still eligible.
Yeah, still
for
Gale eligible. Yeah, she was first year.
So she could very well have a Tasha Gale season into a Harvey Norman Premiership season into the NRLW season. So there's a couple of players and options that you think of there. But circling back to some of your other questions there, Craig. Look, the fact of the matter is, we love Dino, and he was certainly a fan favorite as a player, and a very impressionable gentleman of the game. But the fact of the matter is the girls over the first 3 seasons, apart from making the grand final last year, which came off the back of just squeezing in with a sole victory in the season to make the semi-finals and having an upset in a grand final qualifier in a semi-final match, they've got a very negative record, and some things need to be tweaked. Whether that's the way in which they approach the season and the preparation of and tactically how we go about things. The fact of the matter is, defense is just going to have to be a focus regardless of the wider player group and who takes the field next year. But it's been a losing record thus far. So there's some things that definitely need to come into question. And I'm not someone who likes to put the blowtorch straight down and go, or it must be the coaching. But I'm sure that there's some in their postmortems. Dean will be asking himself some questions, and likewise the club will want to seek some answers to the questions that they might have. So,
yeah, I don't know whether there's going to be any coaching changes, but there's definitely there is something that needs to happen, because you talked about that negative record. Well, it's 5 wins out of 21 games, something like that.
And the grand final appearance glosses that over a little bit. You kind of forget that that's actually the statistical win-loss rate.
Yeah, and it's that was a grand final with 2 wins in that season, getting into the grand final. But look, that happens in a 6-team competition where you can get that sort of result ended up that it was possible, and I think, to be fair to the team, there were close matches where you can see them built. Yeah, last season where you can see them building into it. And you know what? I thought that they were going through the same pattern this year when because before they got their win, they were building up with some really consistent form. But after they got the win, it's been best left unsaid. What's happened the last couple of weeks, isn't it? It was really, really disappointing. So I think there has to be some sort of change, whether it's how they go about the pre-season, because they've had these slow starts, whether it be that they have to get, a couple of key changes in personnel, whether they go the big change, which is like a coaching change. And, the reality is 3 seasons, but 2 years that Dean's had. So I don't know if they would think that 2 years is, making a change after that might be a bit tough, and especially given the injury circumstance this year. But, you can't imagine that they would go into next season with a very similar roster, a minimal change, and expect that things would be any different. Last thing that I wanted to ask was Rachel Pearson. You have to think they didn't get anywhere near the best out of her this year, because there was the injuries to start the season, but it was... I wondered then whether she was carrying an injury, and that calf, because we know how tough calf injuries can be to overcome. She looked like she was struggling for the rest of the season. It was like she struggled with the kicking game. It was hit and miss, and she's renowned for her kicking game. And then we'd see moments where you'd go, this is what it means to have a quality halfback leading the team around. And then there'd be games where it looked like she was struggling with injury. So I don't know, maybe they're a different kettle of fish where she's able to rehab, get well for next season, and be ready right from the start of the season.
And it also makes envisioning where they should take recruitment, or the branches they could take recruitment, difficult, because we don't know what this team looks like with a healthy Albert, a healthy Pearson, and a healthy Kennedy Charrington. You know the team will be better, but by how much? Are they finals contenders? It's a long shot to say they're premiership contenders. You look at the caliber of the field out there, Newcastle and the Roosters in particular, but the improvement in the Gold Coast Titans as well. I don't think they're like a top tier premiership contender by any means, with those 3 players being fit, healthy, not suspended, fully integrated into the lineup. But if they are there, who do you go recruit? What is the biggest move you can make to push that needle into the red? Do you get a sort of Millie Boyle type? Do you need another leader in the forward pack? Do we need a sort of foil to Rachel Pearson? Is Abby Church that foil? I don't know, but it is an interesting question, Craig. Insofar as what does recruitment and what does coaching have to do to shape this team moving forwards? Because, like Quint's sort of numbers suggest, the results haven't been good enough. The consistent slow starts of the seasons haven't been good enough. And while, we've sort of seen a turning point in most of these seasons where you can see them start getting better, by the time they hit that turning point, barring the second part of the actual 2023 season, but the second season in 2023, where they sort of got very lucky in terms of results falling their way and being able to sneak into the finals. By and large, when they've sort of started to find their feet, the season's been over. And it's just not a situation that can continue for the Blue and Gold.
Yeah, I think they certainly need to make changes to how they play. And what I mean by that is the errors were just so...
The passivity in defense, the errors.
Yeah. It kind of feels unkind to say, but rudimentary is the word that comes to mind.
It is very much schoolboy, schoolgirl sort of stuff. And like the sort of thing that drives coaches absolutely insane. It's something that's always, regardless of who the coach is, it's drilled into the team, to minimize that sort of stuff, control what you can control. But for whatever reason, our girls have struggled to stay focused throughout the course of these games. My big hope, outside of any talk of changing coaches, any talk of like big recruits, is that got a frog in the throat. The introduction of the Harvey Norman's Women's Premiership team helps bridge that gap between Tasha Gale and the NRLW, obviously, but also helps us build better squad cohesiveness, gives us a sort of extended preseason, a chance to build connections, a chance to get our girls into match fitness earlier and in better sort of long-form fitness. And that's a lot. Part of elite conditioning is you need that sort of longevity of the program. When the NRLW being just now a 9-week program plus finals, but prior to that was, essentially ran for a bit over a month. It is very difficult to get your squad fully conditioned for that sort of thing. When you've got a Harvey Norman's women's premiership campaign that will dovetail into the NRLW, suddenly you have a chance to really build your elite conditioning setups and have your high-performance managers making a difference for the squad. And that's what I'm hoping will be a big part for the Parramatta Eels, is getting that Harvey Norman squad fit, firing, and really sort of being the building block for a strong push into the NRLW next year.
Yeah, and I think going forward, I think the NRL needs to think about what they're going to do with regard to the tiers of the women's competitions, because I think where you've got NRLW clubs who then have Harvey Norman women's competition teams, I don't know about you, but it would feel weird to me with clubs that were able to field a large number of their NRLW players in a Harvey Norman's team playing against other clubs that are fielding similar NRLW teams and almost having two competitions in one year.
Even before the season.
The season before the season. Yeah, exactly. And I don't know. It's just, I think there needs to be distinctions found. And because before I could look at it and go, well, the Harvey Norman competition is like the old Sydney Premiership, and the NRLW is like the representative season. Almost like an Origin, where because there was a small number of teams that existed, 4 at one point, and it was almost like the players came together into almost Origin-like teams in terms of like the strength of those clubs, because you had a small number of players stretched across. The elite players stretched across the 4 clubs, and then it became 6 clubs. But yeah, I just like to see a real distinction, and maybe the only way that's going to happen is when they extend the women's premiership to two rounds of playing each other, and have almost like a full season, and then the Harvey Norman becomes like a reserve grade. Yeah, during the same time, and as a development,
until then, it is beholden of the Eels to take advantage of it being essentially a way to tune up for the NRLW. So, they have to. This was the only thing they could do, because other teams had an advantage with recruiting players who were loyal to them. I mean, Tiana Penatani was the prime example, where she just was refusing to play for Parramatta because now her Cronulla team was there, and she wanted to play alongside her Cronulla teammates. What chance have you got? I mean, we're lucky to be able to hold on to the Cherrington girls who are running around for the Bulldogs in the Harvey Norman, and had a history with the Cronulla Sharks, and fortunately they love the Parramatta Eels as well. So I mean, we were lucky to be able to hold on to them. In my mind, I mean, I think when I say lucky, I think we were lucky that they are the type of people that they are. With that loyalty to the Eels club. But anyway, there's other Eels news floating around, mate. We've been a little bit out of the loop. We've taken our time sort of breaking down the Flegg, NRLW, and everything around them. But let's move on to other Parramatta news and then general NRL stuff. Got a bit to cover. Let's start with some great news. We've been waiting on that Centre of Excellence and the sort of Kellyville development in general, which is Parramatta HQ, to sort of kick into the next gear. It's finally happening. The Eels have officially announced their contractors for the full development, choosing Kane Construction, the devil's favourite demon right there. So KANE Construction will actually begin the initial development.
The big red machine.
Yeah, that's right, the big red machine, yep. They'll begin their initial developments at the end of this month, actually. So we're actually in the back end of September, so it's good to see that's really starting
I
to
hope
kick
there
into
are
gear.
big red machines up there excavating, and that
Yep.
would make the day. If
That-
I could,
that would be
go
great.
up there and take a photo.
And on the back of that, the club sort of released a little missive saying or detailing what exactly lies ahead for the Centre of Excellence. Among other features, they're expecting it to be the finest facility in the NRL, featuring 5 playing fields or outdoor playing fields, a world-class gym with yoga and cardiovascular spaces, advanced facilities including an aquatic rehab centre and video review sessions for film and whatnot. That's going alongside a 1,500 capacity grandstand that includes a function centre and I think some what's the word I'm looking for? Some sort of like food and drink spaces there. So going to be a great training and game day sort of centre for the Parramatta Eels and the sort of Western Sydney community. I imagine
The TCT Media Centre.
that's right. There's going to be the TCT media box right there, 100%. But yeah, home of the Parramatta Eels for obviously the pre-season and all sort of NRL training. But I imagine it's also going to be the Junior Reps home Flegg Cup probably as well, and maybe even the NRLW for select games, depending on what sort of is the roadmap for the NRLW with scheduling. Because if they're taking home games to Cogra and Canberra, then I'm sure we can squeeze a game in at Kellyville.
Yeah, and the fencing was up. The construction fencing was up a couple of weeks ago when I was at the Flegg training. I did put some photos up on Instagram and spoke to one of the construction people there as they were putting up the fencing, and just said, look, it's. He said, yeah, it's just a couple of weeks away from starting, so looking forward to that happening because it is going to be a bit of a game changer for the club to finally have that level of facility up there. It's not that the modular buildings don't provide them with good training facilities because the 5 fields are already there. So that's in place, 5 quality rugby league fields. They've got all of the administration there. They've got their theaterette meeting room. They've got the dressing sheds that are quality dressing sheds there. They've got a huge gym. They've got the medico and physio spaces there.
I've toured the facilities as well, 60s, and it's certainly not lacking for modern quality, but I suppose the difference is between pushing to modern quality, being par or par plus, and now maybe being world class, which would be a huge upsell for the Parramatta Eels. And I hate using the cliche of like how important it is for stuff like recruitment, but the reality is it is a plus point for recruitment. And for a club like the Eels, which, unfortunately we're not rich in TPAs despite being such a huge club, you need to have a point of difference, and that will help.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's great news. About a 14-month build, something like that, I was told. So if they get started within the next month or two, then it will be maybe close to the start of the 2025 season that the facility will be built. It would be tremendous if it was built in time for the 2025 junior rep season.
Yeah. Junior rep season, maybe an NRL trial would be pretty cool too. So, have to wait and see what sort of time frame we're on there. But good news there. More good news as well, 60s. Parramatta Foundation, which is the associate foundation for the rugby league operations in terms of charity, has a new general manager. Belinda Wolford is going to head the program, and don't really know much about Belinda, but it's good to see the Eels making some moves in this space. They do a lot of positive work with the community, and having a general manager to front that and really kick it into the next gear is nothing but positive.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to an old mate, Michael Basson, who that was his space for quite a long while. He did a lot of groundwork on
This is his baby.
on the foundation, the Parramatta Foundation, the Eels Foundation. It's got a number of arms that work with the community, and so fantastic that that's really kicking into gear. and a nod to those who walked in that space before, including, as I said, Bass.
Yes, indeed. And Quint, you've sort of been involved in the club in the past. It's always good to see moves being made on this front. I know it doesn't impact the NRL and winning a premiership, but the club has an important place in the Western Sydney community, and this is one way of addressing some of its important stakeholders.
Yeah, absolutely, and it speaks to the I guess the growth of the club that they're able to facilitate and actually get these types of programs off the ground. The unspoken part of all of this is, despite going out in the community and doing good things in the wider community, is you're having touch points with potential future fans in doing this, as well as on top of existing fans. And we know that fans and members are the lifeblood of the club, and having the ability to encourage growth in that area while doing positive things in the community, it's one of those rare win-win scenarios that you have in business. So it makes sense to do those types of things, and the fact that we're able to grow these programs and put in resources to further grow them is only a positive thing.
And moving on, just like we all predicted, Kelma Tuilagi is a Parramatta Eel. This one we all knew was happening clearly, as the 24-year-old forward from Manly joins the Parramatta Eels on the remainder of his deal for the Seagulls, which runs through to the end of 2025. Yeah, I'm not sure what to make of this one, boys. Like I said, 24 years old, 192 centimetres. I think he tips the scales at 100-odd kilos. Let me see what his profile says here. 108 kilos. So he's the prototypical modern forward. He's a big unit. He's not old, 24 years. He's got potential. He caught the eyes at the West Tigers as a rookie, and people had high hopes for him. Got poached by the Seagulls, but he sort of fell behind the pecking order for them there. He was starting, and then he was on the bench, and then sort of wasn't getting huge minutes. But this is classic Parramatta, isn't it? They do love a contracted player, and having the other club chipping in, it's their way of making up for a lack of TPAs, I dare say. What do we make of this one? Is it a good fit? We have a lot of back rowers. We are probably going to lose Andrew Davey if the speculation about a medical retirement is on track, and given the severity of the concussion that he had at the end, there's no reason not to believe there isn't at least a basis for that. But you're looking at the likes of Madison, Lane. Hopgood plays in the middle, but he has played out on the edges too. Who else we got there?
Cardi,
Bryce Cartwright, who we're expecting to re-sign.
Matt Jury's is with us as well.
Matt Dury's with us, and hopefully can be a factor next year when he's not, getting his ankle rolled up in reserve grade. Tony Matayeli has transitioned more to the middle, where I thought he looked outstanding, Craig. So maybe he could be a bit of that sort of like that Murata-esque tweener, but right now I view him more as a middle. So it's not like we have a glut, but we also don't have a shortage of edge back row options, and that's not even factoring in some of the young kids in that Ball/Flegg squad that we've been praising so highly. But yeah, does he come in as like that tweener? Can he be a middle edge guy, or is he an out-and-out edge forward for us? What's his position for the Parramatta Eels moving forwards?
Just my thoughts on this. He was someone for me that flew under the radar this year, and I didn't see him as a likely Eels target. I know there are some good judges out there who rate him as a player with potential that has yet to be realised. So I'd have to go with people who've watched him closer than what I have. The obvious you touched on, which is that he's been bought as a replacement for Andy Davey. I guess from my personal preference, I'd like them to get stuck into some signings of backs.
Yeah. We obviously spoke highly of the trio of outside backs in the Flegg that can hopefully make some moves for 2024, but the reality is the Eels need proven depth, like starter options. Right now you're counting on Hayes Dunst to get back to 100%, and I hope he does, because Hayes at 100% is absolutely a factor in the NRL. You're counting on someone like Arthur Miller-Stephen making a jump next year, and Artie could be a guy to do that, but beyond that, you're talking Mike Acevo, Bailey Simonson. Will Penasini, obviously his place in the team is unquestioned, but it's real skinny after, you're barely naming a backline right now.
Yeah, you're looking at Sean Russell then as the other back. So you're looking at the four players who were playing at the end of the season, plus Hayes Dunster as the player that you're hoping can work his way back into full fitness.
And it's just not enough.
So, but I guess maybe if we intended to pick up a back rower, the fact that there's one available now that we've picked up probably shouldn't throw us off thinking that the Eels aren't going to recruit backs, just because the opportunity to sign the back rower replacement came up before the opportunities to sign backline players. We just hope that is the case, that it's just, okay, we got the chance to snap him up now. We need to replace Andy Davey in the roster. That takes care of that. We're now done for those positions. We're pretty much wrapped up for forwards. So, okay, let's look at some backs or look at some spine players. But who can predict what's going to happen? Clint, you got anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, look, at the risk of repeating everything you said, we're all hungry for some outside backs, and it would be naive to think that the retention recruitment team aren't doing that. It just so happens that this opportunity presented itself, and there was a need there, obviously. Likewise, I've only seen pockets of Kelma Tuilagi. I've seen someone who's a hard runner. I've also seen someone who's shot out of the line defensively and not necessarily made the best of decisions. But his tackle efficiency seems to suggest that, at a touch under 90%, that he's more than capable there. And he's played plenty of NRL since coming into grade, both for the Tigers and Manly, despite sort of moving around. So he's been someone that's been considered for the better part of 2 seasons an NRL player. I'd probably look at him as about 3rd or 4th choice in the back row at the minute, possibly pushing for a bench spot. But that's if that's what he's doing, and the onus is on him within the preseason to come in and try and disrupt the status quo and be someone who pushes for that. Then he's going to be having to perform pretty well and jumping some guys that have been, for the better part of the last few seasons, playing some really solid football in the likes of Sean Lane and Bryce Cartwright. Carty even more so this season. That could only be a good thing for our team and the type of pressure you want players to be applying. So, the fact that Manly's chipping in obviously helps us.
And the positive part of it is that we've made the move swiftly, aggressively, got it done before the preseason kicks off. So he's going to be fully integrated into our program. There's not going to be any sort of jet lag getting him up to speed with the Parramatta programs. So that's good. Right now, I want to say I'm fairly whelmed on the signing. I'm not like, oh my God, this is a terrible signing. I'm also not, going, wow, this is going to be this is clearly an Isaiah Papali'i 2.0. The raw material is there. I mean, I mentioned 192, 108 kilos. He's mobile. You spoke about his tackle rate, Quint. It's a tick under 90%. They're raw materials you can work with. So that's a good thing. It's on him now to buy into Brad's program. And, I know people are critical of Brad on other fronts, but one thing I think he's almost unchallenged on is his ability to develop these forwards. He's gotten the best out of it, like journeyman, raw prospects. He's turned good players into great players. He's, salvaged careers of former greats that are sort of slumped, like Reg. But you talk about Reg, Papali'i, Gower. There's a whole list of forwards that have played incredible football under Brad, and it's certainly right in his wheelhouse as a coach. So maybe Tuilagi can be the next off the production line, but that obviously takes him buying in, and I hope he does, because if he does, then this will be a great pickup.
Now, fellas, just before we jump into the NRL, can I just finish off the Eels news by just saying in the Junior League, they've wrapped up with all their grand finals in the last few weeks. And I wanted to give a shout out to Adam Fairley, who has taken over this year as the general manager of the Parramatta Junior Rugby League. And one of the projects that he was working on was the media coverage of the Junior Rugby League, and via their social media platforms throughout the year they've put up highlights, they've put up try of the week, they've put up interviews with young players that have been very entertaining. And then in the final series, I thought it's been really tremendous. They've had quick interviews with a staff member of the team that was in the grand final or the semi-final. They've had an quick interview with the captain of the team, and not so much an interview, but they're actually getting them to say a few words about what they were looking to do in the match, and then you were getting the highlights of the games. And I thought it was a great initiative, what they put there. If people haven't had a chance, jump on to, I like watching it through Instagram on their social media platform there, but I'm sure it's also there on Facebook as well. Check it out. See the tremendous work that they've been doing there, and also a congratulations to all the teams that participated this year, all the boys and girls that were playing Junior Rugby League. Hope you had a great season. Congratulations to the teams that were victorious. But of course, winning's part of it. The best part about Junior Rugby League is the participation, and in the footage that I've seen this year, some of the smiles on the faces of kids that were playing footy, that's what it's all about. So big shout out to the Junior Rugby League this year, and under Adam Fairley.
Yes, well said, 60s. And I think this is the point in the podcast where you would caution or encourage our listeners to take a second, pause the podcast and make yourself a cup of tea or coffee, go for a quick walk, and sort of have yourself something of an intermission. And then
go to the loo.
Go to the loo, exactly. And then maybe I'll see if this works here. Go. Yeah, we'll put the old intermission music on for you there. And we'll come back right.
Hang on. I just got a little quick kiss from Yoko just to encourage me to keep going in the second half of the podcast.
I'm taking my leave.
Oh no, sorry. She's just informed me that it's actually just a good night. See you later. Kiss. So I completely misinterpreted that. She's taken the cue for intermission as a cue for I've had enough of being around you for the day. So
okay, and we're back on that note, and let's get into the weekend happenings in the NRL. Obviously, it's the sudden death finals now. There are no second chances, and that means that we bid farewell to two teams, with the Melbourne Storm taking on the Sydney Roosters and the New Zealand Warriors taking on the Newcastle Knights. Let's start with Friday night, fellas, where the Storm hosted the Roosters down in Amy Park. This was a controversial one. A lot of fallout to come out of this one between missed calls and knock-ons and high shots and sort of the bad blood between a former player on one side of the park and the Melbourne Storm. But ultimately, all history is going to talk about is that the fact that the Melbourne Storm won this one 18-13. Will Warbrick, the hero, carved himself into Melbourne Storm folklore with a 78th minute sensational take in the air to steal back the lead. Not just that, was it like 3-4 tackles after the Storm were denied what was a pretty clear penalty, a chance to regain the lead with a 2-point conversion on the penalty goal there. But they did one better and went to the air. But yeah, the big talking point of this one is the refereeing. Ashley Klein had an absolute Barry Crocker. Now, no one here on the podcast is a huge Klein stan. By the same token, we do acknowledge that NRL officiating is among the most difficult in the world in terms of the pace and whatnot. So, fair play when you make it, the odd error here or there, but Klein had an absolute shocker. The knock-on from the Melbourne Storm, was it Harry Grant, recovering a deflected kick right in front of the post with Klein standing right there and missing it, was potentially A game-changing call there. The Storm would go on to, not only would the Roosters deny an opportunity to attack the Melbourne Storm goal line again for a fresh set, from that end of that next possession, the Melbourne Storm scored. So absolutely huge in the context of the game. But on the flip side, it was it Harry Grant again that got clocked high? I think he was involved in both calls. Harry Grant was clearly hit high. Like, it was a no-doubter penalty. He even played it up and stayed down looking for the bunker to intervene, but they didn't. Was told to get up and play the ball, and they were down 1 point with a couple of minutes left in the game. And obviously, Will Warbrick would go on to save the day off the Munster crossfield kick. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, both teams. It's hard to see either team making a difference in next week's game. But it was a entertaining contest. But unfortunately, it is going to be remembered for the Ashley Klein stuff.
Well, I'll put my hand up and say there's not too much I can contribute here because, for obvious reasons, I wasn't watching the matches as they were unfolding. I have looked at highlights and the controversial incidents. All I'll say about that particular one is I'm not sure how he missed it, and if he had, you'd have to think he was thinking in his mind, no, I think he's held on to it. He couldn't have thought in his mind. He definitely held on to the ball. And what was his worst case scenario if he called the knock on? That they challenge it?
Yeah. And that I suppose is inherently a problem with the challenge system in that you need it to be broken play, or not broken play, but the dead ball to be able to challenge. There's going to be absolute shockers missed that you cannot challenge. And that was literally a case in point here. It may have cost the Roosters a spot in the finals. When you start talking about the sliding door moments here, it's always risky because there's them holding onto the ball there might lead to the Storm hitting back of 2 tries. Who knows? But obviously the momentum would have been better suited for the Roosters though in the context of that particular play. Klein has been billed internally by the code as the top referee for a number of years now, but he has been demoted to the box next week or this week now. As a result of this one, he will not be holding the whistle on the main field. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a huge Ashley Klein fan in terms of the way he officiates, but at the same time, it feels like NRL referees probably need more resources. I would like more eyes on the field. We've spoken about this in the past. I would like more officials running the sidelines so you can correctly measure offside and forward passes in equal measure on both sides of the field, and maybe even having a second official who is not the primary shot call going back to a 2-ref system, but it's really a 1.5 ref system where one ref is just policing certain aspects of the defense or the offense and can just guide the main referee if he sees a knock-on or an offside play. I don't know what the solution is. There was talk about letting the bunker take a more active role in games, and that is a very slippery slope because you either have the bunker rule on everything or only on these select things. And the way they're the media is sort of angling towards opening it up more, I don't know. Like, is it the right move, boys?
You know what? I don't know that we're ever going to get the answer to this. I really don't, because the sorts of errors that we've seen in the finals, they're no surprise because we see them through the year.
Mm-hmm.
Just
because it's a higher stakes game doesn't absolve the fact that it's happening every week.
Yeah. So, the more that the game gets tinkered with technology or rule changes or what have you, I think the more capacity there is for certain types of errors to occur, because I think to myself, there's so many times when a ref's not going to make a call because he thinks, well, I've got the bunker to back it up if this leads to a try. Mm. And the problem is, as John's just pointed out, you end up with sliding door moments. And, it could be that, basically what you have is as soon as a call isn't made that should be made, you have a whole different scenario that's unfolding in front of you. The possession's in a different part of the field. It's maybe with the different team. And then you just don't, because you can't say what if, because you don't know what that what if is going to turn out. I don't know. I wish I had an answer. I think the referees these days are better than they were in yesteryear. Is Ashley Klein a first grade referee? I don't think he is anymore. I think that's been the case for a while. And that's not picking on Ashley Klein. That's just, I don't know. I almost believed what was said about him being a protected species. I don't believe people should pile onto him.
No, exactly. People need to separate the ability to criticise him as a referee in the course of a game and then piling onto him on social media. And when we talk about piling, it's not just saying you're shit, you suck at your job, but it goes well beyond that. And it's same thing with the players. We've spoken about it at length in the past. There are players that we don't like. Jerome Luai is absolutely a villain. He's a heel in the context of the NRL. There's no need for him to be getting death threats or anything like that in his socials. You can hate, and I say this, it's weird to say that you can hate in a healthy way, but that's part of the reason why you watch sports, you play sports, is that there is the rivalry. There is people that you don't like in the context of sports.
There's the entertainment.
That's right. Exactly.
It's the theatre of sport.
Exactly.
You cheer for the baby faces and you boo the heels.
Exactly. You cannot like a Jared Warrior-Hargraves, a Jerome Luai, a Brandon Smith, any of those sort of players, the guys that like to lark it up and sort of make themselves the villains and can be a positive factor for their team on account of it. Our own Kendi Cherrington plays that role for Parramatta. If you're playing against her, she would be an absolutely awful player to contend with because she's always stirring, she's always there being fiery and sort of pushing buttons. And that's why you love her as an Eel, but that's why you don't like her if she was on the other side. So same thing with the referees. You can not like them as a referee when they make a mistake, but don't carry on and go after them on socials and beyond. So that wraps up that one, boys. Unfortunately, we'll talk about them shortly, but I feel like these two teams are chump fodder. Maybe the Storm will surprise if Cameron Munster in particular has a monster game. But yeah, it feels like they're sort of making up the numbers next week. But the other game,
which is a strange thing to say about the Storm in the preliminary final situation,
Storm and the Roosters, but either of them been making up the numbers, but that's the reality that we live in. But in the other game, there was a fairy tale. I'm sort of pushing ahead in the fairy tale ending one way or the other, with the New Zealand Warriors taking on the Newcastle Knights. And the Knights came into this game on a 10-game win streak, and the Warriors, who had a sort of tough couple of weeks on the back of some losses there, but were looking to play their first home game in a final series in eons. They came out and certainly didn't shy in the moment. They absolutely hammered the Newcastle Knights 40-10. There was only a brief window sort of either side of half-time where the Knights looked like they were marginally in this one. Aside from that, it was all New Zealand. Sean Johnson having a whale of a game and linking up with other key players like Nickel Clockstar and Adam Fanua-Blake. The Warriors, too good in the day. It was absolutely electric out there at Go Media Stadium. They really need to, there needs to be a committee that assesses who can sponsor a stadium. It's not the worst I've seen, but it's not a great one either. Excuse me, that's my big border collie there. But yeah, one fairy tale had to end here, and it was the Newcastle Knights, who have been punching well above that. By the way, we've talked about it. A lot of similarities to the 09 Eels. Ponga and Hayne is the fullback sort of superstar, and a team of sort of battlers doing well beyond their pay grade, alongside some handy players here and there. And yeah, New Zealand, they continue on. They carry the torch next week. And out of all the teams that were in this batch of games, between Melbourne, the Roosters, the Warriors, and the Knights, the Warriors are probably the one team that might, and I use that word of the emphasis heavily on it, might be able to make some noise in the remaining two rounds.
Yeah, well, I think we'll have a bit of a dive into that in the our preview of the Broncos and Warriors game. And
on the back of that, any real thoughts about this one, boys? Newcastle ran out of gas. We're not surprised to see that. But the Warriors, they sort of just they got the ship right. They've got a pretty well balanced team. You look at that roster and it's just very solid across the park. They've got some key players in sort of every phase. Nickel Clockstar out the back, Wateen Zelezniak's having a career season. In the half, Sean Johnson's obviously outstanding, but in the front row you've got Fanua-Blake. Murata Niokore has been an outstanding pickup for them. Towie Harris is just a quiet sort of cornerstone of the team. they're just a very well-balanced roster. Webster's done a great job shaping them. And, it's been a fantastic story, their return home this year. It's not a surprise that they've spent, 2 years being nomads due to COVID and sort of taking one for the entire competition. Not surprised that they got a massive second wind going back home and being re-energized by a very parochial home crowd. The Warriors fans are, rowdy, but in a good way. They absolutely love their team. And, suddenly the vibes are very good in New Zealand. And Newcastle, I am worried that this is a bit of a false dawn for them. They'll make some roster moves that will set them back years, a la Parramatta 09, where we, sort of bought into the moment and, extended players that probably should have been moving on. It's just funny seeing how one team had to lose this one, and it was out of the two fairy tale teams. If they'd sort of been on other sides of the draw, maybe Newcastle gets through against the Roosters or the Storm. But the Warriors, they had momentum, they had the balance of the roster, and too good in the day.
I kind of feel as though, and I know I've said this to both of you off the podcast, that this performance from a Newcastle end has been coming for some time. It's pretty damn hard to win an NRL game, let alone 10 in a row, let alone the way in which Newcastle did it. And I get that they had a favourable draw that enabled them. They were just in some white hot form, but there was always going to be a coming down to earth moment. And it almost teased in happening the week prior against Canberra.
They got away from that game very lucky. And like you said,
I kind of think that in watching that and seeing that, you knew that against the Warriors in Auckland, it was going to be a bridge too far for them. Following that performance against Canberra, because that went in extra time and it took a lot of juice out of them, and they only just got away with it in the end. There's kind of some similarities with the Warriors. I know our good mate Adam Hawes said as much on Twitter earlier today with the Warriors' first two finals games, as well as our own Eels' first two finals games last year.
That's actually a good shout.
Getting
heavy defeat to Penrith, and then bouncing back into
coming
Raiders.
Back home, putting on a score and making a statement, then having to go into enemy territory against a Queensland team that had made its way through to week 3 of the finals.
Well, I hope they go one better than Parramatta, I'll tell you what. But I know I sound very miserable about Newcastle, and if there are any sort of Para/Newcastle fans listening to this podcast, if you've got a sort of foot in both sides there, or if you're just a Newcastle fan for some reason listening to our podcast, I'm not doing this to shit on the Newcastle Knights. I'm speaking from experience. No. Your team can hold their heads up high for how they overperformed. Their finish of the season was sensational, and it probably won't be enshrined in folklore the way the 09 season was for the Eels because of how hot Jared Hayne was on the route to winning a Dally M that year. And unfortunately, Kalen Ponga probably is going to run second or third to Sean Johnson and maybe someone else in the final series that I'm missing here, probably Cleary. The Knights did very, very well, but they did very well overperforming. And unfortunately, regression to the mean is a big thing in sports. Even in a competition where we have elimination finals like the NRL, you get sorted out very quickly when it comes to wins and losses once teams sort of have you on tape and can adjust properly the following season. All right, let's keep it rolling, boys. Let's go through some news regarding signings, fines, and of course the West Tigers. That wouldn't be a podcast without Wests. On NRL 360 today, while they were sort of extolling the amazing virtues of this Brisbane Broncos team. And to be fair, it's a very, very good team. I think Pete Badell sort of broke the news that they're on the cusp of re-signing a pair of their young stars in Reece Walsh and Ezra Mam. I mean, Walsh has been a priority for the Broncos ever since he played his first game back at the club and was electric, so no surprises there. But Ezra Mam's been quietly having a very, very good season with Adam Reynolds and Walsh sort of taking most of the spotlight. But Mam's been outstanding for a young half. And they're talking about $1 million plus for Walsh and $750 for Mam. What's our takes, fellas? Fair money for both of those. If the Eels weren't in the position they were in terms of their personnel, and also the reality that we could not get Walsh in terms of just getting him away from the Broncos. But would you be nibbling at either of those two players at that sort of budget?
We've spoken
Walsh.
about Walsh before, and yes, if he's $1 million, that's a bargain.
Yeah, absolutely. Mam's probably getting a little bit over, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
It's
Is it like deal bags where you're banking on the potential sort of coming to fruit, and with Dylan obviously it sort of has, but Ezra's probably not quite at that stage yet.
No, but 1 million only for a player who is potentially a premiership determiner, like at his age already. Like, teams will win the premiership on his back.
Yep.
I have no question. He is a game changer. He can create something out of nothing, and he stays in the game. This is unlike some other players who might drift in and out of a game. He's constantly competing and in moments. So he is a genuine superstar. He's had a bit of lair and mug about him. Obviously, in the past, got himself into a bit of trouble with that. But, man, he's a winner. He's an absolute winner.
I put the question to you, gentlemen, probably about 6 to 8 weeks ago. If Reece Walsh was on the open market, what would you pay for him? And Craig, I know you had no hesitation in saying you'd go upwards of 1.5 million, and that he will likely be the first 1.5 million player in the competition. So we're talking 2/3 of that value at $1 million valuation, if those sources are believed. That's why we both immediately screamed bargain, because I would have no problem forking out 1.2, all things equal, and you've got a full salary cap to play with as a starting bid.
Yeah, couldn't disagree.
Yeah, well, you talk about that mythical X factor, and he has that in buckets. Absolutely electric. He's got that. He's the full package, but the big thing that stands out with Walsh is his pace. He just creates things and sort of capitalizes on things that even other elite fullbacks can't.
Well, talk about elite fullbacks, mate. What if the Tigers re-signed Buller for?
Were the figures out there yet? I'll have a quick gander. But it was very much a monkey paw signing for the Port West Tigers. They re-signed their best young player, which is fantastic for them. Let me see if there's any details here. But it came with a cost, because the West Tigers board have also re-elected Lee Hadjipantelis for a further 3 years. So it's very much a monkey paw-ish. Yeah, unanimously. So they've literally gone. He inherited the meme team that were perpetually ninth or thereabouts, and they've gone nothing but backwards since, including going backwards from a wooden spoon year. They're the first team ever to win a wooden spoon and then be worse the next year. So,
when you say that they've re-elected him, is that like an open? I'm just imagining they're all there in the boardroom, including him, and it's all those who support me for another 3 years. Raise your hand. Oh, what do you know? All your hands are up. So I can't imagine that there is going to be a scenario where the board would vote him out. I think the only time you're going to get a change is if he stands down.
So, yeah, it is a significant upgrade for the young fullback Buller. 4 years, 2.8 million per the Daily Telegraph, so $700K per. If he pans out to be the player they're hoping to be, that's obviously that contract will very quickly look like good value. But it's unfortunately they're not going to be getting much value out of him on his rookie sort of contracts. He's already entered elite echelon money, and they're going to need him to perform at that level moving forwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Valentine Holmes, boys. Old White Bags Holmes, and the prank, or whatever you think of it. I saw on 360 there was an interesting thought. Was it Gordon Talents that might have said it? Where that if it was a prank, it's almost worse. Because it's one thing to do the drugs and be dumb enough to post a picture. It's another thing to joke about it and post a picture thinking there'd be no ramifications.
Yeah, to joke about drugs, to be a role model and joke about drugs on your social media.
Mm-hmm.
it is literally like if you got blokes like that are going out and leading education programs and going out and talking to kids, how do you have someone like that as a leader and role model at your club? As you say, if it's not drugs, he's actually pretending that he's using it and laughing about it, or thinking it's funny to post on social media. Hello?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, what on earth?
But
I mean, look, this would be different, right? This would be completely different if he's just sending a photo to mates and he's not a footballer with a profile. Like he's just the average bloke down the pub. Look at this funny photo. Sends it to his mates. No one's going to give a damn about Joe Bloggs putting up a stupid photo like that. But as soon as you talk about one of the highest profile players in the game, who is, almost an icon within his team and the club
Queensland
in
and
regional
Australian
Australia.
rep,
Yep.
Played at the absolute highest levels, like you said, is seen as an icon within his own team, and one of the players that many young kids will be aspiring to emulate, given how explosive he is as an outside back. It's not a good look. We know players have lives away from football and they can get up to some silly stuff. But if you're dumb enough to post those pictures, the hammer should come down on you. Like a significant ban. Like you talk about bringing the game to disrepute. Whether you want to be a role model or not, you are. That's the reality of the situation when you're in that sort of highly paid, role as a representative player. And the fact that he got a 1-game suspension and a $25,000 fine. It's not even about the fine. Like I know you can hurt him in the hip pockets and you could have fined him a lot more, but 1 game.
It's laughing. It's a joke.
You talk about
something. You might as well not suspend.
Yeah, exactly. It sends such a bizarre message, and disappointing from the game's governing body there and the integrity unit on the level of punishment. I think they got it massively wrong, and it's not even about teaching them a lesson for doing drugs or that. It's about the stupidity of bringing the game to disrepute in that manner. Sorry. I would have gone way. I mean, I know I'm sounding like a sort of book burning conservative right now, but it's not about using drugs. It's about the stupidity of bringing the game into disrepute about that. If you're going to use drugs, do it on your own time in private. Okay, whatever, but don't be posting on Instagram and stuff like that. I would have come down with maybe 8+ weeks, honestly, and then that sends a message. Because footballers keep doing stupid shit, and they need to stop doing stupid shit. Mm-hmm. At least publicly. Like I said, if you want to be a loose goose in your own time, go do that, but don't bring it into the public domain.
Yep.
Alrighty. Now we move on. I don't think there's any other NRL news, boys. I'll have a quick jump into the news channel, see if I've missed something.
Corey Horsburgh's re-signed.
Corey, they finally made that official. That was, I think, 3-4 weeks ago was sort of speculated, but Corey Horsburgh has been made official. Nathan Peets has announced his retirement. Former Eel right there, although he didn't leave on the happiest of terms. Scott Drinkwater's been crowned the Paul Bowman medalist, the equivalent of the Ken Fournette medal for the North Queensland Cowboys. Daly Cherry Evans is endorsing the backflip contract clause. No shocks there. What else have we got going on here?
Alex Twal.
Oh, yeah, Alex Twal. Yeah,
exiting the Tigers.
Yeah, he's been given his the so long and farewell. I don't recall saying good luck or whatever it is, sort of thing, or good luck and farewell. I don't recall saying good luck.
He has pretty much been working at the cracker factory, being at the Tigers there.
Yeah. And now there was some talk about the Bulldogs swiping in for him or going to the Super League. The Cowboys have There's 9 off-contract buyers they haven't re-signed, so they're doing their top 30 pruning there. And I think that there's some Vegas stuff that's not too interesting for us. So it's that's about it.
Nathan Brown. Is not going to be
not part of the future for the Roosters. Yep, what a shock.
Sorry, what have I missed there with Nathan Brown?
He's been confirmed as one of the departing players from the club for the Roosters.
Okay.
So not part of the plans moving forwards. It's outside of that, it's been a fairly tame week for the NRL, which means we can push forwards into NRL previews for the grand final qualifiers. These are the ones to punch your tickets to the big dance. And we've got 1v3 on Friday night with the Panthers hosting the Melbourne Storm out at Accor Stadium. And then on Saturday, it's the Brisbane Broncos 2v4. So it's an all top four affair, the same as last year, right? I'm pretty certain. So the best four teams winning through to the big dance, or the big dance entry tickets again. But it's the Broncos and the Warriors in the Suncorp game at 7:50 p.m. on Saturday night. Let's start obviously with the chronologically first game in the Panthers v Storm. 119 versus 475. I'm honestly surprised it's that close to the line. Or sorry, not the line, but the non-line take there. The Penrith Panthers have named Jerome Luai. We'll talk about that shortly, whether it's worth the risk. On the flip side, the Melbourne Storm have named their Jerome of the Hughes variety. He was under an injury cloud coming into this one. Big boost for them if he is in, because they're going to need a huge game out of him and Cameron Munster, alongside a whole ton of other players if they're going to be even remotely competitive. But yeah, the formidable Penrith outfit, I don't think they're missing any key players, are they? Now, if Luai is good to go, their backlines 1 to 5, Edwards, Taruva, Tagore, Crichton and To'o, probably the best backline in the competition. You got Luai, Cleary, great front row, and Leota and Fisher Harris. Kenny probably the weak link there. He's a serviceable dummy half, but he's by no means a star. Sorensen, Martin, and Yo in the back row. Cogger has been named on the bench. They do have redundancy built into the team if Luai does get injured. And obviously they've got fit enough forward pack to sort of cover for that as well. Smith, Lenu, and Garner round out their interchange for the Storm. I'm trying to see if there's any major changes in the team last week. Looks like a similar back line. Obviously, Hughes is coming to the team at halfback, which will replace Tyron Wishart, who drops back to the interchange bench. They're going to play a surface homeowner off the interchange. What do you think about that one, boys?
Play what? Who were they playing off the interchange?
A Sofa Solomona. He's not starting this one. He's not. They're going to put Kami Kamifa and Christian Welch up against Leota and Fisher Harris. And
have they played him as a back rower as well?
They have at times this season to mixed success. Sometimes he's been dominant. Sometimes he's been invisible. It depends on the mismatches they can get. And Cleary's not exactly a mismatch in terms of defense, so you're not going to be running at him. But maybe if James Graham was talking about sort of being wasn't using the word boys, but the dark side of footy, I think is how he described it. Getting a surface on loaner up against Luai might be the game plan.
Well, you know what? This is actually a different game to how things evolved last year, because, in fact, it wasn't the top four teams that were in the grand final qualifiers. If you remember, the Sharks went out in straight sets.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was so forgettable.
South,
yeah, it was Souths. Yeah.
Souths made the run.
That good old Cronulla Sharks. Good old Cronulla Sharks. Yeah.
Yeah. So last year, it was Panthers 1 versus 7 in this particular match.
Yeah.
So to have 1 versus 3 in this game is, a bit of a different scenario for the Panthers. However, you'd have to think they're going to win. And the only thing is, if they're off their game and the Melbourne big game players are on their game, you could potentially get an upset.
You can never write off Cameron Munster, I think.
No. Hughes, Munster, Grant.
Yeah. And look, Grant's a good player. I think he's a bit overrated. I think the dummy half position in general is probably just a bit weaker than it has been in the past in recent, or not recent, because Cam Smith was there, but going back a bit beyond that, I think it's been stronger. But Grant's great in sort of bursts. I think he struggled in the 80-minute role. But I just look at that team and my eyes just gravitate to number 6. If he's been so quiet for the last few weeks, if they are to win, he has to have a whale of a game, and we know he's capable of it. He might be the freakiest big game player in the competition. Munster is just so hard to contain when he's on song, and I think Melbourne are going to need him to be 11 out of 10 on Friday night.
Yeah. Look, Melbourne, the upset can happen if Melbourne are at their absolute best, especially those star players. But conversely, they need the Panthers to be a little bit off their game. You know what? What the heck? I don't really think this, but I'm gonna push for
The upset.
to go the upset for your man Cameron Munster to have an absolute blinder, and the Storm to win by 6 points.
Craig, you are Craig. You just gave your predictions, Quint. How do you see this one playing out, mate?
I would love to say that I share Craig's optimism for that result, because I would love to deny Penrith the opportunity of a three-peat and let that moment of history remain in Parramatta's hands as the last team to do that. However, the way that I see this is, and I say this for both games as well, there would have to be a real disruption to regular programming, and I'm talking a try that happens against the run of play that shocks the likes of the Panthers and the Broncos, and then subsequent points after that to really throw them off their game for there to be shock results from my perspective. I think Penrith wins. I think they win handsomely. I think they're winning 30-10. I'm seeing James Fisher-Harris doing some damage up the middle with the eye of the tiger and very aggressive throughout that middle third. And I see them winning 30-10 with a first prize score of Peruva.
Very nice. I think that the Panthers are going to be too strong. I would love to see this. It feels weird to say I would love to see the Storm win this one, given our history there. But
dirty, isn't it?
yeah, strange bedfellows and all that sort of thing. But
the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah, I think the Panthers are going to be well too strong. I suppose the only question here is if there is a injury to Luai. I know they've got Cogger on the bench, but that sort of reshuffle can, player comes in cold, not necessarily prep to take on the team the way it would be if he was training as a starter. I don't know. But I think that the Panthers will win and win well. In terms of their best player, you got likes of Cleary, Dylan Edwards. They're always very, very easy options there. Maybe Liam Martin might be. This is the sort of game where there's going to be a bit of fire and brimstone.
Bit of niggle.
Yeah, I think that Liam Martin will thrive in that sort of setting. So maybe he'll be their best on field. All right, boys, let's move on to the second game, which I believe should be the Brisbane Broncos versus New Zealand Warriors, unless something's changed in the last 2 minutes. This one happening, obviously, on the Saturday night, 7:50 p.m. kickoff, and probably the more interesting of the two games. Despite the better competitiveness between the two rosters, there is not much difference in the betting lines. The Panthers are 119, the Broncos are 126, so very short price favourites on both sides here. 1v2 seems the by far and away clear premiership favourites, obviously. But looking at these two teams, they're two of the more well-balanced teams left in the finals. Walsh versus Clockstar, Arthurs and Cobbo versus Montoya and Retains Lesniak. And probably Montoya's probably the smallest name or the least hyped name out there. But he's had a very good season. He's a really solid player.
Very good.
You would give the nod to the Broncos in the centres though. Staggs and Farnworth is formidable. Berry and Pompey are probably kind of like a la Newcastle, two guys really punching above their weight and having great seasons, more so than being consistently at that sort of level. In the halves, Tamaro Martin is going to have a big job to do as he lines up alongside Sean Johnson. Ezra Mam and Adam Reynolds will be on the other side. Front row, Flegler, Haas, Adam Fanor-Blake. That's an all-star trio there across the two teams. Mitchell Barnett's not chump change either. There was some talk about Wade Egan maybe being the Dally M hooker of the year, boys. He'll be the number 9 for the Warriors up against Billy Walters on the other side. In the back row, it's Capewell, Ricky and Carrigan up against Ford, Niokore and Harris. Obviously, Capewell and Carrigan, the two big vets there, even though Carrigan's fairly young. Ricky's having a big turnaround season for him. Has been a defensive turnstile in the past, been much more consistent there. Probably the best kick-chasing forward in the competition now. He's really been the standard for the Broncos in that regard. And on the other side, obviously, we've got a soft spot for Murata, the hitman, the enforcer. He really toes that line between what's legal in terms of the high shots, but sets the tone because of it, and he's been instrumental. I know they've paid a high price to secure him, and maybe that contract in terms of legacy hurts them down the road, but right now has been a huge pickup for them, been outstanding for him, old Murata. And then on the interchange, Smoothie, Piakura, Heverington, and Palacia up against the super utility Walker, Jazz Tafunga, who is another utility. I know he plays lock and dummy half, but two utilities there for the Warriors. Maybe that hurts them. Bowie Sirenen and Josh Curran round out their interchange. There is a distinct lack of big middles on their bench. Wow, I didn't realise how their bench. I mean, I know Curran's a big unit that can play in the middle, but Bowie Sirenen, yeah, I don't know. I was actually surprised. I'm surprised at bench construction there. But got Jared Sutton in charge of this one, and you're hoping this one's the close game, or well, either that or the Warriors spank them. But at least it's a competitive game to watch, because I fear that the Friday night game is going to be a non-competitive one, and leaving this one to sort of salvage the grand final qualifiers.
Yeah, look, I think the reality is that we're looking at the Broncos being just as strongly favoured as the Panthers. So just as I did in the first one, and for a point of difference, even though I don't truly believe it, I will find a way where I will tip the Warriors, because the Broncos have a bad game coming. That's going to be my theory.
There is a lot of pressure on this team. I mean, they've breezed through the regular season. They've turned things around. Walters has gone from being on the chopping block to being a potential coach of the year candidate. And the funny thing is, I don't think much has changed. You know, the same players that were criticising Kevy for not being a good coach, like Cobbo, are still on the team. Just the team's gotten a lot better in general. Yeah,
I think they've been up. I think they've been up for a long time.
Yeah.
If there's pressure that's applied, if something doesn't quite go right this week, I would see them maybe having a little bit of a collapse, and then it's up to Waz.
Up the Waz? I'm actually going to tip the Warriors too. I think that even the Broncos are a better team, but I think they don't need to be. It doesn't need to be a full-on collapse for the Warriors to get a foot in the door here. I think if there's just they're half a step behind where they need to be, the Broncos, I think this team is good enough to challenge them. So, yeah, I'm going to tip a Warriors upset here too. I mean, it'd be great for the game as well. Everything that New Zealand sacrificed over the last few years, get them into the big dance and a chance to grow the game over in New Zealand. Should not be wasted. Quint, how do you see this one playing out, mate? You join the bandwagon? You're going to go up the Warriors, up the Bros, or do you think that the villains prevail?
Yes to the bandwagon. My heart absolutely says yes to the bandwagon. My head sees that Brisbane with a week off and at Suncorp Stadium, even accounting for potentially being down on, and I do like the supposition that you put there, Craig, and them having an off night. That'd be absolutely wonderful. Because I'd love, of the remaining four teams, I'd love to see the Warriors win it. But I just see Brisbane being too strong. They are a very well balanced side, and there's just I think it's kind of been a fait accompli that it would be a Panthers Broncos grand final for probably the better part of the last 10 to 12 weeks. I haven't seen anything to change that. That doesn't mean I don't hope that something different happens, but I see it being tight for Brisbane eventually breaking away and winning at 24-14. I see Reece Walsh being that difference maker and having a man of the match moment. And my first try scorer is a one-time Eels recruitment target, Herbie Farnworth.
Geez, that would be some salt in the wound for us, wouldn't it? We all have high opinions of Herbie, but wasn't to be for the Parramatta Eels. And I suppose that there's a little question before we finish up that I'll pose you guys, given that the Broncos spent some time in the wilderness before arriving here. Would you be content for Parramatta to spend the similar sort of 2-3 years struggling the way the Broncos did, if it meant developing these young kids and putting them in a position where A, they get really good, and B, you keep them to challenge the premiership? Or do you want the Eels to be competitive every season, and that should be the standard, to be competitive every season and develop these kids?
Well, look, I think the Broncos have had players who are state of origin players in development. And in fact, I would have even argued that in the last couple of years, those same players, some of them were underperforming badly. So I probably wouldn't want the Eels to go through something similar, because I don't think I would be happy with players of potential underperforming for a period of time. But that's just me. I mean, I think the Broncos, when you look at their team, and it's not just this top team, there's some genuine depth in positions where
Corey Oates isn't playing, and he'd walk into our team.
Yeah. So I think they're beyond having a few. They've been beyond having a few promising players that you don't know what their ceiling might be, and I think that's where the Eels are at right now. We're looking at the Eels players and going, we think very strongly feel there's an NRL future for this player and that player and what have you. But as you know, predicting someone to graduate from junior pathways into the NRL is such an inexact science that it's fraught with so many dangers. Those players that the Broncos have had, a number of them have been playing first grade for some time, and it's simply taken them a little bit longer to become the players that they should be. And then you throw in players in amongst them like Reece Walsh, who himself was a young Broncos star anyway, but you throw him in there as an absolute match winner. You throw in a couple of old hard heads in Capel and Reynolds, and you all of a sudden you go from having a team of underperforming potential superstar players into a team which is sat up near the top of the table virtually for the season. And as I said to you, in reality, I think they win and win well, but I think they're due for a bad one. And whether it's this week or whether it's the grand final, I'm going to predict they're going to have a bad one before the end of the season.
Yeah, I think that's definitely within the realms of possibility, if not probability. It's a team that has not tasted a lot of success, and when you get the spotlight put on you, it's difficult to perform. Especially when you're realistically you're going up against an absolute juggernaut in Penrith next week, and you've got a very plucky team in the Warriors right now. But sort of as a follow up to that question, and I think it was a fair response, 60s, that the Eels should not have to even consider going into the wilderness the way the Broncos did while developing their kids. We talk about Reece Walsh a lot. If there is a Reece Walsh-esque player out there who is 16, 17 years old, and there's an opportunity to sign him, I don't know if there is one, right? This is pure hypothetical. What sort of we know it's inexact. We know there's no guarantee he's going to be Reece Walsh 2.0. But if the Eels are serious about getting this X Factor player, and they need to have this young talent, what's the budget for a player like that these days? Like, what are you content with the club signing a 17-year-old potential wonderkind to, knowing that some of the contracts we see these days before I even played an NRL game can be quite crazy?
Yeah, I think the deal with someone like that is what you offer them in the second, third, or fourth year. And if they are, and then you'd maybe have a clause in there about their graduation to that level within the team. So I think they are, for mine, they'd be contracts which are structured differently, and the reward is there for them playing first grade in those future years. So, yeah, if you're talking about a younger player, it's just done differently. It's not about the amount of money, really, until it becomes that second, third, fourth year. That'd be my way of thinking anyway. And you just make it so attractive that you take the pressure off them in the first year, and then say, here come the rewards in the years after that. So that'd be the way I see it.
Alrighty, that's a good answer and a nice way to wrap things up, I believe, fellas. So on that note, second shout out to our sponsors of the show, Big Swing Golf Northmead and Star Partners Real Estate Auburn, Rowan and Parramatta, helping us get the content out to you guys to listen to. And on that note, boys, you have my computer making alert noise for whatever reason. Sorry about that. Let's farewell and sign off. And unfortunately, no more Parramatta football to talk about until the preseason, or I suppose potentially the representative squad's pick for the international series coming up post NRL completion. But yeah, we got no Flegg, no NRLW. Not much to talk about in terms of footy, boys.
I'm sure every week there's going to be something about the Eels that we'll be able to talk about, something somewhere. So all that our followers need to do is to know I'm going to head to the Cumberland Throw for the podcast and any news that comes our way.
Hopefully won't be down for another 2 days after a plugin crashed the website. So it's all happening for TCT. As always, thanks for stopping by, giving us a listen. And I'll let 60s finish us off.
Go, you mighty Eels.